an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Red Rising Book 3, Morning Star, chapters 23, 24, 25? I'm so sorry, guys. I read correctly, but I never remember exactly where it was that I was meant to stop. In these chapters, Sevro, well, at least it's dealt with. But that I should have known it was going to get violent. I should have realized. Of course, that's where it was going. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to, I'm going to double check, but I think it's Cassie today. Yes, it is. Thank you, Cassie, for commissioning this episode. Really appreciate you. I have been enjoying having several episodes so close together so that I have just been able to read. And, y'all, these chapters, it was like a relief, of course, in the end, that our guys wound up, like, making up and communicating. Wow, it was really, really hard up until that moment, though. I had such a difficult time, like, making myself get through. Mostly, it was the scene with Quicksilver that was, like, the hardest. The fight, once they're actually, like, beating the shit out of each other, by then, I was confident we were going to be okay. Once you actually come to blows, you're dealing with the problem to a point. It was all of the passive aggressive. And at one point, Darrow suggesting that, like, when Sevro slapped Quicksilver, it was specifically to fuck with Darrow. That was when I was starting to be like, Jesus, this is really getting bad, you know? So, okay, it's chapters 21, 22, 23, Quicksilver, the Weight of Ares, and the Tide. Now, we have what you could argue is a much more important thing happen in this trio of episodes, and that is the fact that our war really gets off the ground. Like, it is declared in a way that it wasn't before. It has a leader in the way that it didn't before. There is a purpose in the way that there wasn't before. Everything about the way that they're approaching this is different. It's more organized. It's more pointed, and there is a sense of organization to it. But all of that, I was confident was coming. And this thing with Sevro is what's at the forefront of my mind, because Sevro, as you all know, has been the security blanket for me in this series with Darrow. Like, once Sevro became his guy, I never had any doubt about Sevro's loyalty, his intentions. I always felt like even when he fucks up, I get where he's coming from. And even in this, I did get it. You know what I'm saying? But when the times that I've been the most ill at ease have been when Darrow isn't with Sevro and he feels so exposed to me because he hasn't got somebody that's like ducking around watching his back. And so to feel that same kind of being exposed while Sevro is in the room with him, that got me. You know, I just really hated it. So we start off with 21 Quicksilver, with Sevro being like son of Ares, because he doesn't believe at all what Quicksilver is saying. Now, I want to acknowledge that, you know, in talking about Mercury in the last episode and how he was one of my particular favorite gods, and the vibe of him always being kind of mischievous, and I mentioned, like, being a trickster, but not real. Like, when I say trickster, I think what a lot of us tend to think of is a more mean-spirited god, like, kind of like Loki a little bit. Loki really did like kind of fucked up stuff. And I think Mercury occasionally did as well. But his thing always sort of felt like one of the gods is trying to keep a secret and get away with something. And he would just like let it out and just be like, haha, fuck you, I'm telling everybody. And it was never really just for the sake of malice and just trying to cause mischief because he enjoyed the chaos so much as it felt like it was coming from a place of like, you're just being a shit and you shouldn't get to be a shit. I'm sorry. And this may be a reflection of the way I received these stories. It may be that like the source that I was reading from and the way I was told these stories growing up, that he was painted in a certain light. So when I say all of this, this is like the interpretation that I have had of him based on what I have read that may or may not have been like translated well, or the story may have been changed a little bit. You know what I'm saying? The way that myths are. So I really went into this understanding that these guys aren't meant to be literal gods, but like they're clearly kind of meant to represent, you know, like that's the point. I really went into it feeling like very confident that he was telling the truth. It's certainly possible we could play the trickster angle and he is just fucking with them and happens to know information because he knows it. But I believed the way that this was laid out. Now, I will say this to follow all of that up, because I love the fact that one of my particular favorite gods is actually a son of Ares and not working with the jackal like I had thought. And that would be his, I'm hoping what his trickster side actually is pretending to be an ally to the jackal. I cannot tell you guys how deeply disappointed I was that in this story, Mercury is a capitalist. It is such a bummer. It is such a bummer, you guys. And it's a combo of just the fact that it's the character who I'm, you know, going to have my own like weird affection for that is unearned just because of who he is. But also, I really felt like the way he speaks was the author speaking to us. So what I'm saying is that the author felt like they were defending capitalism in this little series of paragraphs. And it's just the kind of thing that it ignores like the reality of everything that happens when you have a capitalist society. Like the way that we eventually get over to this discussion is Sevro wanted to know if like you really were a son of Ares, why weren't you fucking helping us? And he was like, why would I help you? You were failing and you were doing bonkers shit that made no sense. And it was like absolutely not worthwhile to throw in with you. And he says, I am not an anarchist, a communist, a fascist, a plutocrat, or even a Democrat for that matter. My boys, don't believe what they tell you in school. Government is never the solution, but it is almost always the problem. And this has been highlighted in my copy 4,186 times. That sentence, government is never the solution, but it is almost always the problem. And y'all, I would just like to point out unions, safety regulations in workplaces, car seatbelts, like the idea that government only fucks things up can only be said by the people who make everybody else into mincemeat through their business, because they don't care that the small people are just being fed into a machine. So trying to act like government is worthless is ignoring the hundreds and thousands of ways that we have implemented government to protect disenfranchised people. And the system by no means is good. I'm not trying to say that. I am saying that there is a lot of good that was done that we can point to because of government. And the problems that we are arriving at aren't necessarily because of government, but because we have set up a system that functions outside of government and created a whole second and, in my opinion, capitalism-based system so that government can be straight up bypassed. Because that is how this shit works now. So I am so sorry, but this pissed me off endlessly. I believe in effort and progress and the ingenuity of our species, the continuing evolution and advancement of our kind based on fair competition. Fact of the matter is, gold does not want man to continue to evolve. So his argument is, capitalism does reward the ingenuity of man, but golds are stifling that because they want power and luxury and easy lives. And I can't emphasize enough how much that's part of capitalism. He's acting like that's like a separate side effect that has nothing to do with capitalism and the way that it's meant to function. That's the point. And saying that it rewards ingenuity, in what way? How many people out there had incredible concepts that they were able to do nothing with because they didn't have the money to get anybody to look at them? Or they had their ideas stolen by somebody who had the power and means to make something happen. And they went to this person with like, what do you think of this idea? Could I get a patent? And that person was like, you couldn't, but I sure fucking could. And then they wound up making a extremely successful whiskey business off of the back of a black man's recipe, for example. Just saying. There is no separating the fact that elites who want to reap all the rewards and send everybody else through a mill are going to be the ones who always come out on top. You can't pull that and separate that outside of capitalism. Those are part of the same package. And it was just so hard to read, you guys. It was just so infuriating to read because, like I said, the whole way this is written, just, it does not feel to me like this is meant to be the character only speaking. This felt to me like it was the author finally getting to make his argument here in a way that was just, as somebody reading a series about how poorly set up this system is, and this character who's meant to be like equalizing, hopefully, the way that everything is set up, it felt like he has profoundly missed the point of his own series, if this is really what he believes. And it's such a fucking frustrating realization. And I may be misreading, I may be assigning things where they don't go, but there is a certain tone, and I think we tend to recognize this, when an author is putting words in a character's mouth and when an author is getting to say a thing that they believe through a character. There's just a different vibe, and that's what this felt like to me. And I might be wrong, and I completely cop to that. But just capitalism, we are in a state now where it has been prioritized to the end of all else, and we are reaping the rewards of it, where people can't keep up with the inflation on housing costs. We are experiencing 20 years of the same flat rate of fucking, minimum wage. And like nobody is benefiting except for the people who are already on top. And that's not an accident. That's the way the whole system is designed to work. And the people who can pick and choose like how things happen in their companies, they're never going to choose the thing that makes them less money. They're never going to prioritize the safety of workers that they have never met, that they don't believe are real people, over making an extra $1 billion this year. It doesn't happen. And if it does happen, those people aren't billionaires. You don't get to be a billionaire by making choices that benefit everybody. Those two things don't go together. And you can fucking quote me on that. I don't care. Anyway, so let's back up even further here, though, because I just had to jump into that immediately because I've read the section twice, and both times that just jumped out at me and beat me over the head, and I had to just get it off my chest. So Sevro is not buying this, like I said, and pretends to for a second before, like, slapping him in the face. And the way that this is, like, I love how this is written. Sevro hits him a third time, casually. And I think it was for me, not the tycoon. Because Sevro looks back into the darkness where I stand with impudent eyes, as if dangling moral bait in front of me so we can explode into conflict again. His moral creed has always been simple. Protect your friends, to hell with everyone else. And I really loved that description, dangling moral bait in front of me. That's exactly how I was feeling in that scene. And when he used those words, I was like, oh, beautifully put. Chef's kiss. Yes, exactly. Like, it is so clear that he is just trying to flex on the fact that, like, I'm in charge, not you in this moment. You keep trying to talk to me and I'm going to dictate when you can talk to me. And I am going to handle this questioning, and I'm going to come at it in a way that you can't undo. And it was so painful to watch because I felt Sevro's hurt at the way that things had shaken out. So there was like a bit of sympathy in me for how he was probably feeling. Like, I understand getting to a point where you are so angry and frustrated at how things have been going that you begin to get wild and reckless with it because you've almost reached a place where you feel like it can't get worse. Even though you know, like, intellectually it can get worse, there's a sort of feeling of like, but how could it though? How could it really? And I have definitely sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, in those cases before myself. So I recognized this behavior, and yet the fact that he is normally when I do this sort of thing, it's self-directed. I'm the kind of person who tends to take out my rage and frustration on myself and hurt myself, not necessarily like in an outright physical, like, you know, sort of cutting whatever you would think of in that. But self-destructive behaviors are the way that I show recklessness. And it's really hard to watch Sevro directing it outward, both because, of course he would, and I need to understand that's the kind of person he is. He doesn't keep things in. He's just not that type. But also to know that he and Darrow are both apparently so disappointed in one another. And there's probably guilt along with that of feeling like, I wanted you to be somebody you're clearly not anymore, and I should have known you wouldn't be that, and I feel guilty for even expecting it, but I couldn't not expect that, you know? Like, there's just so much going on with him. So this was just, there was so much pain mixed in with it. It was just really awful. So again, he's trying to be like, the fuck you are, you're, like, stop bullshitting us. And Quicksilver is like, where do you think Fitchner got the money? And Sevro says, don't say his name. Don't you dare say his name. If you knew him, why didn't he mention you? Why does Dancer not know you? Why would they know about me? You never tied two boats together in a storm. The words are a punch to the gut. Fitchner said the exact phrase when explaining why he didn't tell me about Titus. And at this point, Darrow interjects with, why was Mateo in your bedroom? And Quicksilver reacts here. And I was like, oh, as soon as he's like, how did you know? I was like, oh, he's in love with Mateo. Like, Mateo's a pink. So my assumption, of course, is that this was sex work. But the way he reacts here, I'm like, oh, he really, like, fucking cares about him. And it turns out that's his husband. They're fucking married. So my assumption earlier, Mateo is there because he is a son, and that's the only way that this makes sense, definitely seems like it is holding up. And when he says, like, what was Mateo doing 6 years ago, he gets the correct answer about helping to carve Darrow and everything. Because, reminder, in this scene, at first, Quicksilver does not know that's Darrow. Darrow's staying in the shadows. He's supposed to be dead. And when he comes out of the shadows and reveals himself, Quicksilver is just like, hold on a second. He fucking killed you. What are you doing here? And like, for almost the whole rest of this scene, he keeps looking at Darrow like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. What the fuck? And I keep sort of wondering if somebody is ever going to circulate the suggestion that it was the real Darrow that was killed and this is a fake Darrow. But I don't feel like that's really going to hold up, you know? I just wonder if anybody would try that approach. Because that's the kind of approach that, for a short term, might seem like it could work if you didn't really think through the kind of questions people would ask. So yeah, he says, why abandon us? Why not contact us when Pops died? Because your ship was sinking. Your cells were compromised. I had no way of knowing how deep the contamination went. I still don't know how the Jackal discovered you, Darrow. My only contact to low color cells was Fitchner, just like I was his contact for high color cells. How could I reach out when I didn't know if it was Dancer himself who informed on you and made a power play to get rid of Fitchner? Dancer would never do that, Sevro says with a sneer. How would I know that? Quicksilver says in frustration. I don't know the man. I have videos, conversations between myself and your father. I'm not letting you near a data pad, Sevro says. Test him, I say, make him prove it. So, finally, the test that they use is, where is Tinos? This secret community. And not only does Quicksilver know where it is, he knows, like, how it was constructed and just everything about it, because that's where the funding came from. And you guys remember, like, back when I first found out that Fitchner was a gold, and I was sort of like, or not that Fitchner was a gold, that Ares was Fitchner. And I was saying, it makes sense because there's no way that this could have started fully from the ground up, because you would need funding and you would need a gold to do that. But I didn't really consider the fact that, like, Fitchner really wasn't rolling in it. You know, he's a gold, and so he's going to have resources just because of that. But he didn't have the kind of money that you would likely need. And I should have considered who else way, way up the ladder was helping with the money. And I didn't really, I mean, there was really no point in considering it because it could have been anybody. I didn't know anybody well enough to make an educated guess. So he says, you think all Silvers play it safe and legal? Some maybe, but business in a crony capitalist society is the craft of sharks. Crony capitalist. Now he's differentiating between regular capitalism. I gave your father money. He hired a team, worked off-site, did what I needed him to do, until I discovered he was using my resources for a side project, the Sons of Ares. He makes a mockery of the words. But you didn't report him? I asked skeptically. Golds treat sedition like cancer. I'd have been cut out too. So I was trapped. But he didn't want me trapped. He wanted a co-conspirator. Gradually, he made his case, and here we are. And that made a lot of sense to me. It made a lot of sense both that Fitchner started this in a secret way without directly being like, hey, I need money for my, like, coup that I'm trying to, you know. Instead, involving somebody without their knowledge and perhaps letting them find out on purpose once you are so established in their business that it would be very difficult for them to argue that they didn't know what was going on and where their money was going. That's clever. I'm sure that's just like, a tactic as old as time itself. But for me, a rube, I am impressed. So he says, I watched and waited to see what you would do. He's talking to Sevro now. You are a bad investment. I wanted to see if you were cut like your father, but then they executed Darrow, or pretended to, and you acted like a boy. You began a war you couldn't win, with insufficient infrastructure, materiel, systems of coordination, supply lines. You released propaganda in the form of Darrow's carving in the worlds to the mines, hoping for what? A glorious rise of the proletariat? I thought you understood war. And his scoffing at that got me, because I was saying that I kind of thought probably Sevro did the right thing. And he's over here that was a dumb move. And I was like, oh, I guess I don't know war. I guess I am not a tactician. So sorry. For all his faults, your father was a visionary. He promised me something better. And what has his son given us instead? Ethnic cleansing, nuclear war, beheadings, pogroms, whole cities shredded by fractious groups of red rebels and gold reprisals, disunity. In other words, chaos. And chaos, Mr. Bucka, is not what I invested in. It's bad for business, and what's bad for business is bad for man. And when Sevro says, I did what I had to and what no one else would, Quicksilver says, did you? Or did you do what you wanted to do because your feelings were hurt? Because you wanted to lash out? And Darrow is saying to himself, I want to defend him, but he needs to hear this. This was the kind of thing that I agree with Darrow. And defending him in this moment, I don't feel like it would have rung true. I don't think Sevro would have welcomed it. It wasn't the thing to do. But considering how left things go shortly, I was just sort of I don't know, man. And it turns out that the Jackal isn't as backed by the Sovereign as he was at one point, which Quicksilver's I couldn't figure it out why she was pulling away, but now that I know you're alive, I'm willing to bet you're fucking why. The fact that you escaped, she was just well then fuck this guy, you can't even hold him? Nah. And that makes a lot of sense and is also incredibly embarrassing for you, Jackal. So embarrassing. Quicksilver says, I thought the Jackal less of a threat than his father. I was wrong. And so were you. He needs to be removed. I don't mourn the opportunity lost. You're alive, Darrow, and that means this rebellion is alive. It means Fitchner's dream, your wife's dream, is not yet gone from this world. And he has his whole capitalism talk. Golds claim to be gods, and they are not. Why should men toil in the mines when we can build robots to toil for us? Why should we ever have stopped in this solar system? We deserve more than what we've been given. But first, gold must fall and the Sovereign and Jackal must die. And I believe you are the sign I've been waiting for, Mr. Andromedus. I paid for your sigils. I paid for your bones, your eyes, your flesh. You are my friend's brainchild, my husband's student, the sum of the sons of Ares. So my empire is at your disposal. My hackers, my security teams, my transports, my companies, all yours with no reservations, no strings, no insurance policy. Gentlemen, in other words, I'm all in. And then comes the reveal. Darrow's all right, well, we're not going to blow those bombs anymore. And when Quicksilver finds out what that was their plan in the shipping docks, he's like, Are you fucking serious? That would destroy everything. Because, of course, he would panic because his whole thing is that business is what is making everything make sense. So this sort of, he just wouldn't see this as a tactic that's legit. I maintain I don't know enough to make a judgment call on this. I understand the thinking behind wanting to create such chaos that people can't help but take you seriously because you are interrupting such fundamentals in supply lines in a way that is like really going to affect everybody. But there isn't a next step to this. And that's sort of what has been on my mind a little bit, is like, you're going to blow things up and then what? And there never really felt like there was an and then what? It was just blow it up and everything will collapse and it'll break all of our systems will begin to break. And then what? Just what's the next thought? And eventually Darrow actually asks that question. So I was relieved. So then we have finally Darrow saying to Sevro, "You didn't tell me Mustang contacted you." And Sevro says, "Yeah, you're fucking right, I didn't. Because you got manipulated. You let people manipulate you, and that's why our friends are dead. That's why my dad is dead. So, no, I didn't tell you because she would have fucked with you and you would have fucking let her." And I was not prepared for that accusation. I should have seen that coming. I will be honest, I never even considered Sevro blames Darrow for his father's death. I never even thought of it. I thought Sevro was so ride or die for Darrow that he would never even take it that way. And I think that's part of what's cutting Sevro up, is that he hates that he blames Darrow because he wants to be so ride or die that he doesn't think that way. But he does. He feels that. And he can't make himself not feel that. And so throwing it in his face, he even apologizes for it later. And Darrow's like, "You don't apologize. We both know it's true. And you should say it. We should be able to say it, say everything to each other." But Sevro's like, "But it's a fucked up thing to say. I really shouldn't have fucking said it. I always say fucked up shit," which he's not wrong. He fucking does. But yeah, we have this standoff here where he opens the detonator and Darrow keeps being like, "We aren't doing this. We aren't doing this." And Sevro is like fucking a child standing next to a hot burner. And the kid's mom is like, "Don't touch that burner. It's hot." And the kid is laughing, putting his hand toward it, thinking, "I'll really show her," when in fact, you are just going to fuck your own self up, sir. What do you think you're going to do? He is not seeing it like that, though. He is seeing it as the principle of getting his way and not doing what Darrow says because he blames Darrow. And it's look, I personally, there are times where main characters, I do blame them for stuff because they should have seen shit coming. They were missing obvious signs. I saw a couple of signs with the jackal, but Darrow, I don't blame him. Severo says, "Because you thought you were smarter than everybody." And I'm like, is that entirely fair? Is that really what was going on? Kind of. I don't know. The main thing for me that I thought should have been a real warning bell to Darrow was the fact that the jackal apparently had given his blessing for Darrow to be adopted. That for me was the real, okay, does that seem like something that he would do? Does that make sense to you, sir? Stop and think about that. But otherwise, I didn't feel like there was anything too huge that he just willfully ignored. maybe Roke. I don't know if there was any calling Roke back. I don't know that was in his power. But I'm curious, you guys. So, Sevro starts to press the switch. Darrow uses a jam field. And so, Sevro tries to get outside the jam field. And this is when we get kick, punch, punch, kick. They just go at it for a couple of seconds. And I love the fact that when Darrow says, "Are you done?" and tries to help him up, it's just a feint, and Sevro kicks him in the balls. 1,000%. If I were going to be writing a fanfic with Sevro fighting, that is exactly what I would have him do. He is so shady. I imagine Sevro looking a little bit like a weasel, just because of that sort of imagery. You know what I'm saying? Crippling nausea swells from my lower back into my balls and my stomach. Beside me, he's panting like a dog. At first, I think he's laughing, but when I look up, I'm shocked to see tears in his eyes. He lies on his back. Huge sobs make his ribcage shudder. He turns away, tries to hide from me, to stop the tears from coming, but it makes it worse. Sevro. I sit up, feeling ripped apart by the sight of him. I don't hold him, but I put a hand on his head, and he surprises me by not flinching away, but instead crawling up to put his head on my knee. You guys, is there anything more pathetic? And I don't mean pathetic in like a negative way, you know, in a contemptuous way. I mean it as this kid has been brought low kind of way. It's like a little kid. He really is. He feels like a kid. And in some ways, that's what I like about him, you know? But there is the whole other side of that coin for sure. And they just have a sort of like heart to heart. And again, Darrow says like, it is my fault. We need to be able to say shit that's hard to hear to each other. And Sevro says, I helped you at the Institute because of the way they looked at you. I'd watch you at your fires in the gulches when Titus was in the castle. Saw you teach Leah how to cut a goat's throat, even when she was afraid to do it. I wanted to do that too, to join. Why didn't you? Was afraid you wouldn't want me. They look at you that way now. Don't you see that? He snorts. Nah, they don't. The whole time, I tried to be you. Tried to be Pops. It didn't work. I could tell everyone just wished it was me the Jackal had captured, not you. You know that's not true. It is, he says intensely, leaning forward. You're better than I am. I saw you when you looked down at Tino's, saw your eyes, the love in them, the urge to protect those people. I tried feeling it, but every time I looked down at the refugees, I just hated them for being weak, for hurting each other, for being stupid, and not knowing what we've gone through to help them. I know it's nasty, but it's what it is. And I can't tell you guys how much I related. This is the worst side of me. I have very little patience for people who don't have empathy or minds for the big picture. And I can be very contemptuous and dismissive and hateful of folks who I feel have the capacity to know better and do better and appear to simply not want to, you know? And some of those people, all it would require is some patience, and they would begin to know better and do better. They would. I've seen it. I've been one of them. But I find it so hard to extend the grace to other people that was extended to me, which is a really unfortunate attribute. I don't like it about myself. And I often think about this scene in Parks and Rec where the main character, Leslie, who works for the Parks Department, has these meetings with like the community every now and then. And it's just a crowd of people making absurd demands and appreciating nothing that she does for them. And I could never do it. I could not do that job because I would be so resentful of the fact that nobody understood or appreciated what I was attempting to do. And then there are people like this who other folks appreciating it is not the point. It's to do it because it's the right thing to do, to care for people and to help them. Whether those people kiss their feet is completely irrelevant. It's not about that. But I can't separate their attitude and reaction to me from my attempts to do right by them. And it's a problem, you know? So this whole thing was just so, I really, really appreciated this because it was real honesty from a character that I like. And Darrow follows it up with like, look, it may not be the same, but I hate that they remind me of what I was. You would have hated me. I was comfortable and arrogant and selfish on my knees. I liked being blind to everything because I was in love, and I thought for some reason that living for love was the most valiant thing in all the worlds. Even made Io into something in my head that she wasn't. Romanticized her and the life we had, probably because I saw my father die for some cause. And I saw all he left behind, so I tried to cling to the life he abandoned. And I thought that was insightful. I liked it. It makes me feel small to think I started doing all of this for her. She was everything to me, but I was just a piece of her life. When the jackal had me, that's all I could think about, that I wasn't enough, that our child wasn't enough. Part of me hates her for that. Do you know how glad I was to read that? I know that's like fucked up to say, but you guys remember how upset I was that he was angry at them for executing her with no anger whatsoever directed at Io for she literally like put her head in the noose knowing she was pregnant. And I was like, why is he not mad at her also? I'm not saying more than the people who executed her, but there was nothing. And here it is, finally. She didn't know all this would happen, wasn't even aware that the worlds had been terraformed. All she could have known was that she was making a point to the couple thousand people in Lycos. And was that worth dying for? Was that worth killing a child for? Now all these people think she was divine or something, a perfect martyr. But she was just a girl. And she was brave, but she was stupid and selfish and selfless and romantic, but she died before she could ever be more. Think how much she could have done with her life. Maybe we could have done this together. I think the shittiest part about getting old is now we're smart enough to see the cracks in everything. We're 23, dipshit. So then Sevro asks about whether Darrow believes they're being observed by the people they love who passed away. And Darrow is about to give him a real answer. I don't know, but sees that Sevro really, really needs this to be true and says yes. So it ends this chapter. What are your orders, Reap? Which was heartwarming to hear. I'll tell you what. So now we go to 23, The Tide. And they go back into the other room. I love Victra seeing them absolutely like busted. And is like, oh, good, you talked. The rich man, Ragnar asks curiously, he wears no manacles. That's because he's the son of Ares, Rags, Sevro said. Didn't you know? And Victra, of course, bursts out laughing. And then when she realizes they're serious, she's like, hold the fuck on. Come on. But, yeah, Victra eventually gets on board. Mother always said you had secrets. I thought it was something sexual, that you liked horses or something. It says Sevro shifts uncomfortably, and I was like, why? Sevro, you're not into horses, are you, my man? I don't know about that. So, the first thing that Darrow has them all do is tear their suicide teeth out of their heads. I understand his thinking here. I've been captured before. I will not be captured again, so this is worthless to me. I don't plan on dying, but if I do, I die with my friends, not in a cell, not on a podium with you. I get it. I won't be captured again, but like, that's kind of the point of being captured, is that you don't know you're going to get captured. So I understand the symbolism of this, but I felt like saying, I'm not going to get captured again, is the point of having a suicide tooth. Anybody else a little confused by this? Bueller? Because it just seems to me you're biting down on that to ensure that you don't get captured. It's weird to me. I don't know. I understand that this is meant, like I said, to be symbolic. It's supposed to be sort of like, well, we're not terrorists the way that we were. But it just felt like we are just sort of ignoring the fact that that's what they're for, though. Anyway. After I detail my instructions to my men and they depart to execute the orders, I return with Sevro to the Sons of Ares control room and ask for them to prepare a direct link to the Citadel in Aegea. Think they already know we're here? Probably not quite yet. Think he's going to piss himself? Let's hope. Remember, nothing about Mustang and Cassius being here. We're keeping that one in the pocket. And the conversation, he calls up, I would like to speak to the Archgovernor. And may I say who is calling? It's the bloody damn Reaper of Mars, Sevro barks. One moment, please. Oh, God. Sevro does his little song again. So the Jackal shows up. And he's eating breakfast. Unflappable. This fucking guy. Ugh. He's like, oh, is Victra with you? God, you're looking great, Darrow. Adria says, you're no doubt aware there's been an explosion at Sun Industries and your silent partner Quicksilver has gone missing. We have kidnapped Quicksilver. I see. To what end? We will be holding him for ransom until you release all political prisoners illegally detained in your jails and all low colors concentrated in internment camps. Additionally, you are to take responsibility for the murder of your father publicly. Is that all? You also have to personally kiss my pimply ass, Sevro says. Lovely. My agents tell me a flight moratorium was instituted 10 minutes after the attack on Sun Industries, and the vessel which fled disappeared into the hollows. Am I to assume you're still on Phobos? I pause, as if caught off guard. If you do not comply, Quicksilver's life is forfeit. Lamentably, I do not negotiate with terrorists, especially ones who may be recording my conversation to broadcast it for political gain. I listened to your proposal, now listen to mine. Run. Now. While you can. But know, wherever you go, wherever you hide, you cannot protect your friends. I'm going to kill them all and put you back in the darkness with their severed heads for company. There is no way out, Darrow. This I promise you. He kills the signal. Oh my God. Cassie is in the chat saying in Golden Sun, when Sevro was out in the solar system boonies, Darrow mentioned Sevro would send weird pictures with unicorns. Cassie, I don't remember that, and I really wish that you hadn't reminded me. Oh dear. Oh no. Oh God. Okay, I gotta refocus. You shook me, Cassie. Jesus Christ. Ugh. All right. So we then go into the setting up of this big moment that he's going to have. There's a mention at one point that, what is his name? Is it Krabos? That he was like mysteriously allowed to escape. And I'm assuming that was just on purpose, letting him go back because like they're not meant to be obviously in league, right? Oh yeah, here it is. 6 hours since I learned of Kavax's escape from our detention cell. Someone let him out. I am really, really assuming that was like kind of on purpose. And I don't know that. I don't have anything to base that on, but I have a feeling, you know? Now I carve awake in the silence of the heart of the hollows. My bone-white razor is on my arm. At my side flies Sevro, wearing the huge spiked helmet of Ares with pride. He brought it along, but the rest of his armor is borrowed from Quicksilver. It's cutting-edge tech, better even than the suits we wore for Augustus. Holiday follows behind, along with 100 sons of Ares. And they all have their grav boots and, tons of equipment and everything. As I coast into the central hub of the city, I say a silent prayer, willing Io to give me strength. A holographic display casts society comedy programming 100 meters long, 50 meters broad. And all the cameras focus in on him. A ghostly giant of the girl I knew, her face is quiet and pale and angrier than in my dreams. Hair dull and stringy, clothing drab and ragged, but her eyes burn out from her gray surroundings, bright as the blood on her mangled back, as she looks up from the metal whipping box. Her mouth barely seems to open. So her death and him kissing her feet, all of this, they watch. And then he begins his speech. And it's a really good speech. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's one of those where if you told me that it was going to last like multiple paragraphs, I'd be like, I don't know, boss, you might lose them. But it's well structured. And I feel like it would be effective despite being a little bit long. And he says, they expect your obedience, ignore your sacrifice, and hoard the prosperity that your hands create. To hold tight to their reign, they forbid our dreams, saying a person is only as good as the colors of their eyes, of their sigils. I remove my gloves and clench my right fist in the air, as Io did before she died. But unlike Io, my hands bear no sigils. Removed by Mickey when I was carved in Tinos, I am the first soul in hundreds of years to walk without them. The silence in the hollows gives way to sounds of shock, fear. But now I stand before you, a man unbound. I stand before you, my brothers and sisters, to ask you to join me, to throw yourselves on the machines of industry, to unite behind the sons of Ares, take back your cities, your prosperity, dare to dream of better worlds than these. Slavery is not peace. Freedom is peace, and until we have that, it is our duty to make war. This is no license for savagery or genocide. If a man rapes, you kill him on the spot. If a man murders civilians, high or low, you kill him on the spot. This is war, but you are on the side of good, and that carries a heavy burden. We rise not for hate, not for vengeance, but for justice, for your children, for their future. I speak now to gold, to the Orient who rule. I have walked your halls, broken your schools, eaten at your tables, and suffered your gallows. You tried to kill me. You could not. I know your power. I know your pride, and I have seen how you will fall. For 700 years you have ruled over the dominion of man, and this is all you have given us. It is not enough. I cannot get enough of it. And he just goes on, none of the shit you think you own is yours. We built all of it, and we're taking it back. So, enjoy finding out how much you utterly depend on us for fucking everything. Do you guys know how bad I wish this could be real? I don't know how this would even work nowadays. You know, like, ugh. Yeah, enough said. Enough said. So, everybody gets worked up. We have the pounding of fists against chests as they start to, like, mobilize, and shit really begins to pop off. And we get a sort of, like, verbal montage, if you will, of all of these different people of different colors, like, realizing that they are in a position where they can make some shit happen, feeling downtrodden and hopeless, and then all of a sudden, wait a second, maybe I do have something, you know, some leverage in this world. Break the chains, I roar. Ragnar, bring it down. The greens cut to a different feed as the fists pump and the cages rattle, and we see a distant shot of the Society's military spire on Phobos. A Goliath of a building with docks and vestibules for weapons, efficient and ugly as a crab. From it, the jackal maintains his grip on the moon. There, the greys and obsidians will be donning armor under pale lights, rushing through metal halls in tight lines, stocking ammunition belts and kissing pictures of their loved ones so they can come down to the hollows and make this heart stop beating. But they will never make it here. Because as fists pound even harder into cages, the lights of that military spire go black. All her power turned off by Rollo and his men with the access cards provided by Quicksilver. We could have bombed the building, but I wanted a triumph of daring, of achievement, not destruction. We need heroes, not another Ash City. And I really wish that we could have just been inside when the power was cut. I wish that we could have seen just the way everything came slamming to a halt. It would have been very gratifying, you know? I just love it so much. So here come these ships, and there are reds, and I think there's another color, reds and oranges that are clinging to it. And here is Ragnar. They divide down the length of the building. Suns fire magnetic harpoons to tether the skiffs to the steel, and then they go with practiced ease along the lines, flying at implausible speeds as the little motors on their buckles pull them one by one toward the building. More than 1,000 welders pour onto the vast building like we did Quicksilver's Spire, but they're not playing for stealth, and they're better in null gravity than we were. Dozens are ripped to shreds as Greys inside fire railguns out the glass. But they fire back and pour inward. And all of this, reminder, is on camera. All of this is, I assume, being transmitted to everybody, because that's what the Quicksilver's deal is, right? It's like being in with the Jackal on the media and everything. This has got to be getting people shit in their pants, I have to imagine, at this point. Ragnar flows through the young knight without stopping, swinging both his razors like scissors. I told him I wanted the spire. I didn't tell him how to take it. He walked off with Rollo, putting an arm around the man. Now the worlds watch a slave become a hero. And Sevro begins to yell for everybody to rise. And folks are pulling out, because they're in what I am imagining is sort of like the setup of a prison, where the spaces that they sleep are cages, and there's no privacy. It's just like a place that you can lock yourself into where nobody can like fuck with you while you're asleep. But there's nothing about it that is really yours, that feels, you know what I'm saying? Which sounded so like utterly depressing. And he reminds them all again about no rape, no murder of innocents. This is just one of the stacked cities of Phobos. The Suns will supply them with weapons, but there won't be nearly enough to go around. Their sword is the press of flesh. Sevro will lead them, spend them. Victor and Quicksilver spires will guide them, and the moon will fall to the rebellion. But I will not be here to see it. And that's the end of the chapter. So he leaves. I just want to stick around and watch this. Is that so wrong? I just want to hang around and watch, and also get to jump from place to place and watch all of the other people who are seeing this happen on screen freak out. I just want that delicious, delicious schadenfreude. If I'm saying that correctly, I'm not even sure. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. But thank you very much, Cassie, for commissioning this. But fuck you very much, Cassie, for telling me about Sevro and the unicorns. I will not forgive you. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.